Hi everybody! This video is going to go over the collaborative project. So this project is based on our reading of Weaver and Bush's book, Grammar to Enrich and Enhance Writing. And it essentially asks you to create a digital presentation and a writing activity that reflect Weaver and Bush's principle of grammatical and stylistic instruction, and then also a rationale that explains how your presentation and writing activity reflect those principles. So the final draft of all of this stuff, the presentation, the writing activity, and the rationale are due on Thursday, November 7th. And in front of you, you have the prompt, so I'll just go ahead and scroll down and talk about some of the components. The first thing you see is a list of topics. As I say in the prompt, you can choose one of these topics. If there's something else that you would like to focus on that's not on this list, you're also welcome to run that by me. This is a starting point, so if there's something else, feel free to run it by me. And then I'll talk about sort of each component of the project in detail. So the first component is the digital presentation. So this presentation should be about 10 to 15 minutes, and it should essentially teach the grammatical or stylistic concept that you've chosen. And it should teach that to an audience of either middle school or high school students. And in addition to that, it has some other requirements. So it should show the influence of Weaver and Bush's philosophy of teaching grammar. So this means that it should avoid the traditional methods of grammar, the traditional methods of teaching grammar that they teach. And in general, to think back to the principles that they talk about, it should be sort of positive, productive, and practical. So that means that it should present grammar in terms of options. So things that you can do instead of things that you shouldn't do. It should approach grammar in terms of sort of effectiveness. So, making choices that have the effect that you want on an audience, as opposed to in sort of terms of sort of rules. And then finally, it should try to avoid overly complicated grammatical terms when possible. And then in addition to that, you should, sorry, reading off my thing. You can use any program that you want to create your presentation. Two programs that are fairly easy to use that you can get for free are Screencast-O-Matic and Voki. Screencast-O-Matic, at least, I know you can just use your regular sort of PowerPoint and a webcam that you have in order to create it, or a microphone that's just attached to your computer. And I think you can do that with Voki, although it's been a while since I've used that program. If you have another program on your computer, like you have a Mac that has better sort of recording capabilities and has programs built into it, that's also fine. What I eventually want is just sort of a digital file that has the presentation. So however you want to go about producing that is fine. And then in addition to that actual video file, I also want a full transcript of the presentation. So that transcript will basically have whatever is being said in the presentation. And a tip is to actually write the transcript first. So that way when you are creating the presentation, you essentially have a script that you can read off of. It's a lot easier to create a script and then use that as your transcript than it is to speak off of the cuff and then create a transcript of what you said. Okay, so that's the digital presentation. The next component is the writing exercise. So the writing exercise should reinforce your mini lesson. So like the presentation, it should show the influence of Weaver and Bush's philosophy about teaching grammar. In a nutshell, this means you should avoid traditional grammar worksheets. Instead, you want exercises that are asking students to use what they have learned in actual sort of writing, and ideally in sort of authentic forms of writing. And if you wish, you can also include a simplified lesson plan that sort of shows how you would use this exercise. So how you would introduce it, how you would reinforce it, what kinds of follow-up questions you might ask. I'm not requiring this, but if you feel like that helps sort of contextualize how you see this exercise working within a classroom, you're welcome to include that. And then the final piece is a rationale. So that should be 1 to 2 double-spaced pages, and it should essentially explain how your presentation and exercise show the influence of Weaver and Bush's philosophy of teaching grammar. And specifically, I want you to talk about how it reflects their sort of ideas of grammar instruction being positive, so being framed in terms of sort of options rather than telling students what they shouldn't do, how it should be productive. So in other words, framing grammatical instruction in terms of sort of its rhetorical effectiveness as opposed to arbitrary rules. And then finally, how it's practical. So how does it, to the best of your ability, sort of avoid confusing or complicated grammatical terms. Oh, that is not how I scroll. Give me just a second. Okay, and since this is a collaborative project, it's a group project, I also have some guidelines for rules, guidelines for working with other people. And these are sort of basic, but I put them in here because any group member that basically doesn't do this may be removed from the group. So I put these in here so that if your group comes to me and says this person hasn't been meeting these guidelines, I have it in writing that I, as the instructor, have the right to remove you from the group and ask you to complete the project on your own. So what I'm expecting you to do is to, first of all, regularly communicate with your group members. So this means regularly checking your email and responding to any messages from group members within 24 hours. Secondly, submitting work on time. So this includes deadlines that are set by me, but it also includes any deadlines that are set by the group. And then finally, I expect you to submit high-quality work that reflects a strong understanding of Bush and Weaver's philosophy of grammar instruction. So I'm expecting you, and your group members are expecting you, to have read Weaver and Bush and to understand the basic principles that they're talking about, so that when you go to produce work, you're producing work that reflects that philosophy of grammar instruction, rather than having your group members have to tell you what they're saying and do the work again for you. So those are the sort of basic foundations, and as long as you're doing those things, you should be good. If you're not doing those things, then you are at risk from being removed from the group and being asked to complete the assignment on your own. And then I have the groups here, which you should have all looked at by now. And then finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit about these deadlines. So because this is a group project, and because an important part of working with a group is project management, and an important part of project management is having a project schedule, I've gone ahead and put together some deadlines to help you with scheduling your project. And you are welcome to create additional deadlines. In fact, I encourage you to do that. But at a minimum, these are the deadlines that I have and places where I'll basically be expecting you to submit parts of your project. And you should have a designated group contact person who is submitting all of this work. So the first deadline is this Sunday, October 20th, and all I'm asking for at this point is an email to me that has basically 4 things. The first thing is your topic. So of that list of topics at the top of the prompt, which one have you chosen? The second thing I'm asking is the name of your group contact person. So that's the person who's going to be submitting all the work. And the third thing that I'm looking for is a summary of each group member's responsibilities. So basically what this means is I want a breakdown of what you're expecting each person to do. And it may be that you're expecting everybody to equally contribute to every part of the project. So everybody to work on the slides, everybody to work on the transcript, everybody to work on the worksheet or the activity, everybody to work on the rationale. And if that's what you want, that's fine, and you just put that in there. However, you also may want to sort of like break up certain responsibilities and say have one person be responsible for doing the slides and the transcript, and another person be responsible for doing the activity. Have one person be responsible for writing the rationale, and someone else be responsible for, say, recording the presentation. If you're breaking up responsibilities like that, then I also want that in that email. And then finally, I want the names of any group members who haven't responded to emails. So if there's someone who just hasn't been responding to emails, or you've been trying to get in contact with, I want to know who that person is, so that I can reach out to that person and we can sort of figure out how to make sure that you're having the best group experience possible. Okay, the second deadline, which is a week from then, Sunday, October 27th, is I'm going to be asking for a draft of some parts of your project. So I'm going to be asking for a draft of your presentation. This essentially means I want the slideshow and the presentation script. So I want the PowerPoint slides or whatever slide program you're using, and I want the transcript. And then I also want a draft of the writing exercise. I do not recommend that you go ahead and record the presentation at this point because you'll be getting feedback from me on your presentation on both the slides and on the transcript. So you probably don't want to go ahead and record it until you've actually had a chance to hear what I have to say about it, and also until you've had a chance to sort of think about the slides and the transcripts some more and polish them. So I'm not asking for the actual presentation, the actual sort of video file. What I'm asking is the slides and the transcript, and then a draft of the writing exercise. At this point, on the October 27th, I do not need a draft of your rationale because most of you will probably, the rationale will be the last thing that you write, because the rationale should, when you write the rationale, you should, understand what you're actually doing in the presentation and the exercise. So at this point, you don't need to have a draft of the rationale. For October 27, all I need is a draft of the presentation, so that means the slideshow and the transcript, and then the writing exercise. And then the final deadline, which is a Thursday, not a Sunday, so please take note of that. I'm going to want the final draft of everything. So that includes a final draft of the presentation. So that means the sort of video, the video file, or a link to the video, and the transcript, and then the final draft of the writing exercise and your rationale. So those four things, if you think of the video and transcript as different things, will be due on Thursday, November 7th. And then finally, I have just a sort of general rubric that talks about my expectations for the project. It sort of gives a breakdown of what I'm looking for. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me, but I won't go over that in this video, and I'll let you read that on your own. So I am looking forward to hearing from you guys, hearing about what topics you're picking. And I expect to hear that this Sunday. So for this Sunday, I expect to have an email that has the topic, the name of your group contact person, a sort of an explanation of how you've divided out responsibilities, and then the names of anyone who hasn't responded to your emails, just if that has happened. And then otherwise, let me know if you have any questions. But otherwise, I will look forward to those emails and to seeing drafts of your project within a week of that.